Let's do it.
Great. Okay. Welcome to a news episode of Sports Talk Central. I'm your host, D Mahmood, and with our normal co-host, Hunter. And today we're going to be a short episode. We're going to be just talking about the Ravens and Steelers game. So Ravens, Steelers ended up winning 18-16. I'm going to start with the Justin Tucker conversation just to get that out of the way. So obviously he missed 2 field goals, and I think I texted you about this. He always seems to miss left, and it's like you always look at what's going on. The fact is, the guy's 35 years old. People don't know that because a lot of people in the media talk about, oh, he's automatic. Oh, now he's missing. No one brings up the fact that this guy was a rookie in 2012. So if we want to have that discussion of is he washed in the sense of, we can have that discussion in the sense of he's 35. Whether he was good or bad, we are going to have that discussion of how much longer is he going to be the kicker. The issue that I have is when you have his lack of performance, because of his age, there are certain things he cannot do. He cannot be an eraser like he was in his prime. But for him to limit erase the mistakes have to be made. And the problem with the mistakes are when you're kicking a field goal or kicking an extra point, you got the long snapper, you got the holder, and you got the kicker. If the long snapper messes up, the kicker might mess up, and all the blame goes to the kicker, but we have to consider whether the hold was good or bad. And in that third field goal, by the way, Nick Moore had a bad snap. So it's interesting, like for me, I need to take a look into it, but it would be really interesting if you drew a line, like if Nick Moore was standing here, you drew a parallel line from Nick Moore's left leg and his right leg, and you point where the snap was when he missed. If you see a lot of it to the right leg, Tucker has to overcompensate for it. So to me, before we talk about the game, if you want to give your thoughts on this topic, but long story short, if you want to, there might be an operations issue. So when we do have this discussion, I want to try to separate the two. But what are your thoughts?
I think that's totally fair. I do feel like a couple of the snaps weren't the greatest, but we do also have to acknowledge that I think he will go down as one of the best kickers the NFL has ever seen. You can make an argument that he is the greatest kicker in NFL history. But
I'll take Terry or someone else.
Yeah,
but
I mean the thing is with him, Father Time comes for everyone. He's 35. He's no longer the best kicker in football. That's what happens. I mean, you can compare this to other sports as well. I mean, obviously, I'm a big hockey guy. Sidney Crosby for a long time was the best player in the world. He's not the best player in the world anymore. He's still very good, but he doesn't have that title anymore. Justin Tucker, he was one of the best kickers in football.
One of the best pitchers. Justin Verlander, one of the best pitchers. Clayton Kershaw, one of the best pitchers. And then guess what? He's not. They're mid-rotation guys now.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. It was just very jarring to see him miss not one, but 2 kicks in the same game against the Steelers. He usually always has crushed the Steelers. And to see him miss both of those, it was like, okay, I was stunned. And for those unaware, yes, I'm recording this on the side of the road just because a couple things going on this weekend. So hopefully the connection is good. But good we got that out of the way. This was another rock fight. The people that said, Adi, that this was going to be a shootout, 35-28, 34-31. I don't think these people have ever watched a Ravens-Steelers game. It was never...
Please get into the mud, wrestle in the mud, and whoever is the dirtiest ends up winning.
This was always going to be a rock fight. Every game between these two teams, dating back to when John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin both got hired, has been exactly this, even going back further than that as well. This is how these two teams play against one another. And, we can have this discussion as well. I'm going to ask you this. Does Lamar Jackson have a problem against the Steelers? Because I felt the Steelers played a very good defensive game today. That's the best I've seen the defense play all year, in my opinion. Yes, I feel like there were a couple of plays his receivers could have made. For example, Zay Flowers, wide open. Should have had that. Peyton Wilson, that interception. That's just a better play by him. That's a great throw by Lamar to Justice Hill. But do you think overall Lamar Jackson has a Steelers problem?
I think when you have a division rival, you are always building your team to stop your division rival. And it's fair to say Ravens and Steelers are the biggest, like in terms of hierarchy for the Steelers. It's Ravens and then everyone else. So that's the first thing. It also helps when you have great pass rushers, or when you whether it's pass rush, secondary, defensive line, receiver, whoever it is, when you have someone like TJ Watt, who's so above average compared to like the normal player, combine the two, and I do think you do have those situations. And I think so basically when you throw out these numbers, like, oh, Lamar is great against a ton of teams, but he's not great against the Steelers, you expect it. Like there's probably guys on the Packers who are great against the Bears, but they're not, who struggle against the Bears, but they're great against a ton of other teams, because probably the Bears, with more competent coaching, game plan against whoever else. So I think, to answer your question, it's a combination of, with Mike Tomlin, he is trying to stop Lamar every single time. And also you do have very, very, very above average players at certain positions. So I think it's a combination of game planning. But also on the Ravens side, I do think that they did a good job stopping Derrick Henry. They did a good job. And the Ravens also did beat themselves. There were a ton of penalties. I mean, look, the fact is, if you counted the amount of flags, the terrible towels weren't the only thing. Like yellow towels weren't only found in the stands. They were probably littered with flags during the game as well. So there were
a lot of holding calls. That officiating crew has called the most holding penalties in the league this year. So that, I feel like, was a big reason why the Ravens were penalized a bit more. The Steelers were catching up later in the game. They had some really bad penalty calls as well, especially with Broderick Jones. Just not another good game from him. But the offense struggled. This was Russell Wilson's worst game as a Steeler. He did not look comfortable in the pocket, made a really boneheaded decision at the 5-yard line. The red zone defense needs to be so much better. My biggest thing was, you brought in Justin Fields late in that game. You honestly could have done that multiple times when you got down to the red zone. The couple of plays that they ran at the Ravens defense, it looked like they had no answer for what Fields was going to do. You know he's going to run the ball when he comes in, but it looked like the Ravens really didn't know how to stop it, even though it was only 2 plays.
Roquan wasn't there. Roquan wasn't in the game. True. Yeah.
That's also a good point. It just felt like, to me, if I'm the Steelers, I bring Fields in at the 5-yard line or something like that. But going back to the defense, best game they've played all year. The way they were able to limit Baltimore's weapons, the way they were able to frustrate Lamar Jackson was something to behold. I mean, and they've done this so many times against Lamar. He looks like, a god compared to so many other teams. He looks mortal against the Steelers, a little bit against the Chiefs as well. But you got to credit the game plan with Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin. They only sent 4 at times. Sometimes they blitzed him. The Ravens blitz pickup was pretty good, but also there were times I felt like where Lamar was kind of holding back. There were a couple of times my light turned off by accident. That's okay. Hopefully I'll just figure that out. Whatever. There were a couple of times, for example, where he had grass in front of him, just didn't want to run. I don't know. Something just felt spooked a little bit, but it was a great game. Once again, these two teams are two of the best teams in the conference. That game in Week 16 in Baltimore is going to be a lot of fun as well. But I think this game, even though the Steelers often struggled, I think this should show a lot of people that this is a contender right now to come out of the AFC. Do I think they can beat the Bills and the Chiefs right now? I would lean towards no, because obviously they're both playing right now, and the Steelers have struggled against both those teams. But you show that you can play with Baltimore. You show you can beat them. This is one of the top teams in this conference. And if they're able to get the offense going a little bit more, they are going to be a very tough out come January. Again, it's something just feels different with this Steelers team compared to other Steelers teams. I don't feel like they're fraudulent compared to that 2020 team, for example, but it was a great win. The defense played their tails off all game. Just need more from the offense. Arthur Smith needs to be better at adjusting. Russell Wilson needs to play better from the pocket. They need to have better route concepts. They started using Darnell Washington a bit more, which was nice, but you need to use the middle of the field more. You need to use Mike Williams more. The offense still needs to be so much better.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also going back to the Chiefs. I think that's more of an Andy Reid versus John Harbaugh thing. With the Steelers, it's more of a Lamar versus the Steelers thing. But also, Zach Orr's been criticized a ton as a defensive coordinator. Thought he
Yeah.
had a pretty good game plan. Now,
He
granted,
did.
yep, he had a good game plan. The secondary, you know what? The secondary gave up a ton of yards to Jamar Chase and the receivers for the Bengals. I thought they did a good job. When Brandon Stevens actually turns his head, he can make plays. Like he's this guy that he's very sticky in coverage. It's just that he keeps his head is not focusing on the play, and that's why he gets mossed so many times. So I thought the defense played well. Tre'Davious White had a great deflection. So the defense, I think, is rounding into shape. The offense is rounding into shape. I still trust Tucker. It is a little hit and miss, but then again, this is just like you still got Sam Cook in the building. They can correct those mistakes. And I'll say this: the Ravens' offense is so good that it felt like, I don't know if in your opinion, it felt like a few years ago, it was like Justin Tucker was the best offensive player. Like he was like the Ravens would go not get touchdowns, but Tucker would bail them out of field goals. They don't need Tucker to bail them out. It just happened to be an opponent that they had to score points. So I think there were definitely positives to take from this game. And then also just briefly on some other games, Commanders, Eagles barely beat the Commanders. Saquon is valuable there. The Monday night game, Jared Goff threw 5 interceptions. That was something to watch.
The Lions are great, man. And you saw today, didn't mean to interrupt you there, they dismantled the Jaguars. That was embarrassing for the Jags. And I think tomorrow, man, Doug Peterson, I do not think he's going to be the Jaguars head coach tomorrow, sir.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this would be the second time Doug Peterson would be fired from a team.
Yep.
So I mean, honestly, I think is it fair to say Doug Peterson is a guy that 1 to 2 years he will help you out, but then he's for whatever reason struggles after?
I think that's very fair to say. Again, I don't know why my light won't come on in my car. It's just not working right now. Whatever. Everyone can see. Hopefully everyone can see me talking here. But yeah, I think I don't know. In my opinion, I think he's better as a coordinator than a head coach. I don't think he can do fine for a couple of years. He's not going to sustain long-term success. I think he's a much better coordinator than he is a head coach.
Kind of like a Greg Roman-ish type, like more for a passing game. Yeah, I think he's Greg Roman.
If he's your offensive coordinator and you maybe have a more defensive coach, for example, I think it can work for him. But I think as a head coach, I don't know, man. I understand he has a Super Bowl with the Eagles. That was great. But I think right now the league's kind of caught up to him, and I think he's better off as a coordinator.
Also, the league is probably caught up to Trevor Lawrence as well. So that's
yes, I agree.
Yeah. So we'll end the show on that note. We'll be back next week. We'll talk about the Virginia Tech Duke game. We'll also talk about rest of the NFL.
Yeah, we'll be back next week for a much longer show. We'll probably have some baseball stuff in there too.